dig. Good. Hut, hut, over, hit, push it, push it.
For me to think that I would ever finish Catalina first or cross the Molokai 5 times or, you know, participate in solo racing to the level that I am would never have happened if I didn't have good coaching along the way.
When I determine who the crew is and I determine who would be best in what seat, basically in Hanohano Outrigger, it's law. What I say goes.
All coaches are the same but yet different. I think most coaches try and make the most people happy that they can.
You know, here's a guy who's been at it for 20-some years and he's still learning, and I don't think that that would ever stop if you keep your mind open to it and you don't allow yourself to get fixed on one, nope, this is it, this way it's gonna go.
You're always learning, always learning. You may be the best, but you know what? There's someone out there who knows a little bit more, so you need to go find that person and soak them for their knowledge.
Each seat is real unique in that it has its own experience. Sitting in seat 1, it can be pretty lonely up there. There's no one to look at behind you. You can often feel isolated, like you're the only one pulling the boat.
When I sit in the front, there are times when I think I'm the only person pulling this boat along. It is just so heavy up there. But then there's other times when you catch a wave, you're just woohoo! You're just paddling along and it's fun, and you know you got a lot of power behind you to catch the wave, and that's fun.
The stroker is usually a person with a very smooth, very fluid stroke, someone that's very easy to follow, someone with a big heart, someone that people will follow into the gates of hell, you know, one of those type of people.
You can have a lot of good strokers that can keep a good pace, but some of them don't have any rhythm. It's something that comes naturally. You cannot teach rhythm. It's like you can't teach someone to dance fluidly. It's natural.
Number 1 calls out hike, number 2 calls hut as a response, and then everyone else in unison responds with the ho.
Hut, ho. I like the front. As much as the person in the back thinks they're in charge, I like to think I'm in charge when I'm in the front.
The number 2 seat is basically a backup stroker. They're doing exactly the same thing as the stroker's doing, only thing on the opposite side.
Usually in a race, number 1 and number 2 would be interchangeable. A person can paddle number 2, can paddle number 1.
Number 2, you have one person in front of you, so it's kind of, it's you and I. Let's go. Let's make this work. The guys behind us will respond to what we're doing.
They have to understand who is in front of them and how they paddle and how they are aware of the water, because they're really setting up the other side of the boat, so to speak. The paddles behind them, the whole other side.
Also, seat 2 needs to be able to talk to seat 1 and talk to them, relay messages. Seat 1 has a hard time hearing what seat 6 says. So seat 2 is very important on keeping both sides of the boat even and together.
Your number 3 and your number 4 seats are usually your power seats. I like to have my strength there, and they're usually the heavier people.
They, being taller, would have a tendency to have a little more muscle bulk, so that's why we call them our engine room. They're, or pieces of meat. They just go out there and plug away at the, put the paddle in and start pulling.
It's your job to try and just grind it out. You're a grinder in there. You're a horse in the boat. Your job is to just, you know, muscle the boat.
Seat 3 and 4, big engine. You know, you want your biggest pistons back there. Also understanding the water, understanding how to move the water, again, efficiently, because it's very easy, seat 3, 4, and also in seat 5, to just go with the rhythm. Just go with the flow. And you want people to be in those seats that you can trust, that are paddling hard. They're not just going with the flow and looking good with nice technique. You know, they're pulling water.
I like to have a number 5 person that knows how to surf. Simply because they can read water. I don't have to call power from the back. And it's good to have a number 5 that knows how to steer also.
If he gets into a situation where there's big waves or there's somebody mainly big waves. If the steersman needs a little extra oomph, steering the blade with a poke or an uni, number 5 has to know that need and react to that.
Seat 5, when you first start paddling, it's kind of funny because you always get thrown in seat 5, which you feel is the worst seat of the boat half the time, because they always throw the new person back there because you are following somebody, no one's following you, no one sees you, and you can make all the mistakes or do all the stuff you want back there. However, seat 5 is probably one of the most important seats in the boat, and most people don't know that, and they feel bummed when they get put back in seat 5.
Truly, they're the sole person moving the back of the boat. Yeah, you have your steersman, and yes, if it's a good steersman, they're paddling as hard as they can and as many forward strokes as possible. But seat 5 has to be a big, strong person as well.
Seat 5 is also a pusher. You know, the water is moving very fast back there, so they've got to be able to apply pressure and resistance on the blade and not let the blade kind of fly through the water, because it's very easy to get very complacent back in seat 5 and let the paddle go with the water back there.
The number 6 seat's the steersman. He's the driver of the boat. He's the babysitter. He's the person, he or she is the person that has to maintain obviously a straight line.
You can have control over the boat, but there's more to it than that. It's being able to get the boat to do what you want it to do, not just to keep it straight.
In order to take a good paddler or 6 good paddlers and create a good team, you have to establish some kind of trust. And that trust is between the paddlers, their coach, and their steersman especially. Because the steersman, everyone knows in outrigger paddling, is the captain of the crew. You are in charge. From my point of view, when I'm steering, I drive that canoe like I drive a car. I know when I can accelerate, and I know when I need to slow down. And in outrigger paddling, you have to communicate all that verbally. Like if I want to pick up speed, I have to let them know I need power now. Or if I'm trying to maneuver around a canoe or into position to make a power play, I have to let them know, cut back 10%, step up 20%, give me a 2 beats up on the pace. All that has to be communicated, and I'm constantly talking to get what I want from my paddlers. And they need to be disciplined enough to give me what I want when I ask for it, and they have to trust me enough to know that I'm asking for something for a reason.
When I pick a person to sit in seat 6, I generally look for somebody that's very confident in themselves, a person that's mildly aggressive, a person that's not afraid to take charge, and a person with a very positive attitude. It takes a very positive attitude to sit in that seat. If you're a negative person, you'll never be a good steersman.
So I enjoy seat 6. Part of that is because I have a little control freak.
Sitting from seat 6, it's kind of your job as psychologist, cheerleader, coach, navigator to kind of bring these guys together and keep them together. Say what you think they need to hear, say what you think you would want to hear if you were in their position.
He has the ability to look around, see if any canoe's coming up on him. The rest of the people keep their eyes forward and concentrated on what they're doing.
A lot of times if you flip, it's the steersman's fault. You take the wrong course, you can do the wrong direction. Anything can happen. And the steersman has a lot of control on the boat. The paddlers, they are there to basically paddle.
The steersperson, definitely the person in charge. The motivator, the leader, must have leadership skills. Otherwise, it'll be a tough boat race to win.
When you win, the entire team wins, and when you lose, it's the steersman's fault.
If you win the race, it's because your crew was strong on the water that day, and if you lose the race, it's because your steersman did not do a good job. The person in the back either didn't pick a good line, or wasn't motivational enough, or wasn't strong enough that day. So you take that blame always. You very rarely get credit.
Here we go.
We're more competitive than we used to be. The competitive nature has increased, and we want to be as fast as we possibly can on the water. And we know that the design of the boat has a lot to do with that.
You know, there are a lot of purists involved in this sport, Hawaiians that believe that everything should be kept as was. And the ultimate athletes pretty much did away with all that.
There are a group of people who want to remain very traditional and a group of people who are the innovators who want to really open things up.
How do you move forward if you don't get to try new ideas? If the tradition and the ideas of the masses, what they think is right, is always going to hold back the innovator.
So we have a dimensional criteria, and within that waterline dimension length, on the radiuses of the hull, it has to meet a certain dimensional width at the waterline at various stations.
In other words, you had to stay within certain parameters, but within those parameters, you could experiment. And so one of the first things we did was to experiment with the composite of a boat, not just pure fiberglass. Pure fiberglass with 10-inch seats, the whole 44-foot boat, you wiggle one in and just woo, 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 it's like jello. So this going through the water, that you just lose all that energy, just dissipates out. So we wanted to stiffen the boat up. So I believe we were the first ones to use a Kevlar skin, a 3/4-inch foam core, and then another Kevlar skin, and vacuum bagging with epoxy. We took the boat over to Hawaii, and they said, you can't race that canoe. And we said, why not? Oh, the boat's made out of kryptonite. I said, say that again? Well, that's that kryptonite boat we heard about. I said, okay, you've been watching too much Superman or what? Kryptonite? Kevlar? You mean Kevlar? Yeah, that's the stuff. I said, oh, guys, that's fiberglass. It's just a form of fiberglass. Oh, no, you cannot race it. I said, well, why? Oh, it's not in the specs. It says fiberglass. If your hull can be lightweight on the bows and stern, and you put the weight in the center of the boat, the canoe will be able to surf a little better, so it rides a little better in the open ocean.
They want something that will surf, because they generally have a condition where you're more of a rear to quarter swell, and you have a chance to surf the wave. So they want to build a canoe that has a little bit flatter, broader back on it, so the wave picks up the canoe and thrusts it forward.
There's many factors related to making the boat go faster, the speed of the boat. The rigging of the boat, the ama, which is a balancing device that's rigged to the boat and off to the side, the design of the ama. There are many different designs for that piece alone. The yakus, which hold the ama to the boat, there are different shapes and sizes of those now, where it used to just be a log almost, and now we're arching them and we're trying to make them lighter, and we're trying to make sure that they put the ama in the right position. Big water ama. We want more volume, more surfy. Small to medium water. Well, we want to take some of the rocker out. Flat water ama. We want it to just pierce the surface and just ride beautifully. Give us some tracking out of it. Now we need a quiver. Amas. You go, oh, what's the weather going to be like today? And okay, we'll use that ama.
Again, trying to rig the ama as light as possible is the key, because you don't want to drag it any more than you need to. But there are times where if you're having a lot of, you have wind or waves coming from your ama side, you want to make sure that you're out further to create the stability. So you have to do some kind of compensation. You rig it closer, you can go faster, but you have more chance of going over.
The other aspect is the rigging, the actual lashing. Traditionally, they've used, it started with like a hemp-type cord in the early ancient days. And then they used cotton rigging, then they used nylon rigging. Now they use strapping, like motorcycle tie-down type strapping and ratchets. So the evolution is moving now to where we're just using nuts and bolts.
How experienced the crew is will determine how close you can pull the ama in. And obviously, the closer you can pull it in, especially in flatter conditions, the canoe will run faster pulling it closer to the hull.
I can put shims back down on the left, and we can get this fine tuning that we want. Well, now we've eliminated that. We have two towers that are like chapstick tubes. You go to the bottom, they're telescoping.
So you go to the bottom of them, you just twist, give me 2 twists, take out 2 twists, and these things just move automatically. So you've got infinite measurement.
And then probably the most personal piece of equipment is the paddle itself, and that's changed tremendously. And every year there's something new.
A bunch of fellas from the kayaking world came to Hawaii and to the Molokai race, and they brought these T-tops. And the T-tops weren't new to the sport of canoeing, but they're new to the sport of outrigger racing.
Well, here come these guys with what had been a real prevalent use of T-tops and a bent shaft blade from the marathon world. And they looked at us and go, well, of course, it's kind of natural. This is what we do.
What the angle blade does for you is it puts the blade through the water more perpendicular for a lot longer than if you had a straight blade.
The night before the race, we were technically not allowed to use the paddles by the governing officials of HCRA. You cannot use those paddles. How come? Well, give us a reason. You just can't use them. Well, how come? They just would shrug their shoulders, and finally they would say, well, it doesn't fit the specs. And there are no specs in the Hawaiian rules. It only says must be made of wood. Doesn't say anything about shape. Doesn't say anything about T-top, no T-top, double blade. It just says single blade made of wood. So somebody went back to Oahu. We had a friend go to Bishop Museum and happened to see in a book, Canoes of Oceania, I believe, there's a decorative paddle underneath a Hawaiian chapter that had a T-top on it. And we brought this to them. Someone had brought it across the channel that day before the race by boat, and brought that into the powers to be, and they said, well, looks like it's okay. The end result of that weekend was really is still today one of the biggest highlights in my life. We actually won the race. It was the first time a mainland team had ever won the men's Molokai canoe race.
Your paddle is your baby. It's a very personal piece of equipment. It is to me. And I do have my own paddle. However, if I'm given another paddle, I'll race with it. I'm not so attached to the paddle. I've been raised in my whole athletic career that it's not the equipment that makes you go fast. You know, it's you. Here we go.
I've done the Molokai crossing 20 times, and in the 20 times I've won it 10 times. It took me 8 years, or it took our team 8 years to figure out how to actually win the race.
Once you do that race, other races pale in comparison, I think.
I wasn't experienced enough or prepared enough to really do a good job.
You go over the first couple years and you think you're going over the race, but actually what you're doing is going over there to survive and to get across.
I went into that race with 23 years of steering behind me and surfing canoes. You get out there in the middle of it and it's beating you.
You know, we were surfing down one wave, they're surfing down the other wave, and he lost control, I lost control, and we ended up, you know, nose to nose.
It's not at all uncommon for the canoe to be halfway out of the water with 1 and 2 looking down, way down there in the trough below you.
Because you've just gone over this wave and you're just so high up there, and there's just air, and you may come down and now you're up to your waist in water.
each year you continue to do the race, you become more prepared to the time where it's time to start really racing the race.
Turns can be really messy, and when done improperly, you know, not approaching it at the right angle, it feels heavy, sticky.
If you don't hit it, you know almost immediately, because the boat's just sitting, just dragging.
It comes to a stop. The boat comes to a complete stop, and then you gotta dig in so hard to get it going again, and you're already got Popeye forearms going, you know, because you're just paddling so hard.
There are people who turn well, and there are people who just turn.
There are times when, you know, it's really hard to control the canoe and get the canoe to the person, and once you do, the canoe might end up on the other side of the girls, and at that point, the more experienced crew will know how to handle something like that.
I was supposed to be on this side of the boat, and the boat came down, and I was on the wrong side of the boat. Thank goodness the person didn't get out of the seat.
And I've had to tell crews in the past too, if I'm not coming straight at you, you stay there. I'm gonna get to you, but I might need to come over here so that I will ride with the swell into you. So you just stay there and have faith that I'm gonna get to you.
I had just hopped out of seat 2, I believe, and on the right side. And when I came up, Mindy was looking at me and she says, "Get in the boat, you know, get in seat 5. And so I grabbed the back of the boat, the back of the Manu, and of course the boat slows down. And actually what happens, she jumps up to seat 5, I jump up to seat 6, and I steer my team to the finish line in the Catalina race. It was great.
What you would say to motivate an average paddler doesn't work anymore. So my job from seat 6 is not so much to motivate the paddlers, as I've always done in the past, but it's become an informative role. They want to know what's going on, and they want to know where the boats around us are. Is our hull speed up or down? They want the detail. We want the details now. We've gotten good at our sport. We understand what's going on, and they want to know the details.
Everybody's there, the homework's been done, you're showing up to perform.
The team that makes the least amount of mistakes is a team that's going to win that race.
It was a great race. We came around Diamond Head, and at that point, you normally know your head around Diamond Head, and it was just the most fantastic feeling, you know, to try and accomplish something that big.
It's a marriage between the paddlers and the canoe, and it's fun because the ocean is alive. It's different than any sport I've ever been in. I've been in a lot of sports. Being out there on that ocean, when it's moving, when it's alive, is one of the most wonderful feelings in the world. But even more wonderful than that is winning a race out there in those conditions. Being in the lead canoe and having a team that's really pulling together and working together, it's great. It's terrific.
Good. Hut, over, hit, push it, push
As
it.
a steersman, I try to go and sit in all the seats and find out what each seat is all about. So it's easier for me to talk to each crew member during a race or during a practice and talk to them about what each seat does.
Understanding all the seats, I think, makes you a better paddler in the seat that you end up in.
Discipline is the most important thing. Without it, you have chaos. You have no goal. You have no goal in sight. You don't know what you're aiming for. You don't know what you're working for.
In a sport like outrigger paddling, you need that. It's not an individual sport. You cannot be the kingpin and think you're gonna go win.
You have 6 people in the canoe. Ultimately, you want 6 people paddling to have ultimate hull speed. So every time the steersman would have to steer the canoe, that means he's not paddling, so you're back to 5. So if you have a canoe that has a real flat bottom and you have a real bumpy condition, the canoe would want to really dance on the water. So you're taking your steersman out of the the paddling position. So therefore you're going to slow down to a degree.
You have a lot more to think about during the race. You just can't be narrow-minded and just think of one thing. You've got so many things to calculate during an entire race.
With a rounder hull, it helps the boat track a little bit better. And through this tracking, your steersmen are able to paddle more often.
When you have wind early in the morning, that means the swells are going to be up. So you're going to have an AMA. You're going to have an AMA that has a little more body or weight to it, or you place weight on the extreme outer portion of the hull.
Well, I'm going to rig the AMA out about 72 inches. I'm going to make sure that my crew's not worried about hooliging. I'm going to have a lead collar that I'm going to put on the back yaku, and I can slide out if it's needed. If not, it'll stay in.
But it's usually the steersman's call, and if the steersman isn't that experienced, then it'll be up to the coach. And what the coach has to take in mind is not what the racing conditions are at that particular point, but where they're going to be paddling to and come back from.
The water's just going every which way, and without being rigged really snug or really tight, you have a chance of the AMA starts moving from side to side.
Are they going to be paddling into the wind? Is there swells coming downwind? Are there swells cross?
The minute it gets loose, the AMA starts wobbling. Of course, you lose the confidence of the crew. The crew would be worried about the AMA coming off, and then they're not going to be paddling at their full potential.
Normally, you want to know what the tide conditions are going to be that day at a specific point in time. That being the start of the race, how much the tide fall there is, and then at the end of the race.
As far as changes go, most teams will replace their stroker every change, and they'll do 1-3-5 changes, 1-2-4 changes, sometimes 2-person changes. Every team has their own method of doing changes.
Picking up a person when you're in the water is pretty scary. And if you don't have a steersman that you trust, a lot of things could happen. A lot of things could happen. In other words, a lot of bad things could happen.
That's the most dangerous part of the Molokai race, personally, as a paddler. Jumping out of the canoe and getting into the canoe is great. Getting in and out of a fishing boat in 10-foot seas is dangerous.
You can be left behind, you can be hit in the head, you can all of a sudden, you know, be on one side of the boat and the wave comes and it takes the boat completely over you and you're on the other side of the boat.
Sometimes people are missed and left behind, and sometimes people run over, and sometimes they wind up on the other side of the canoe.
And all this is timing. It's just this amazing timing that hopefully is really good. It can win or lose a race just on that timing itself.
Once I hit the water, after I get out of the chase boat and I'm in the water, the first thing I'm thinking about is, I can get in the boat. I hope I can get in the boat. And as soon as the boat's there, I'm in the boat, you know, and then that's it. There's no more panic.
It takes a lot of concentration, and in Molokai this year, it took a lot of strength. I mean, they weren't always on the line that the swell was on, and it was very physically challenging for me sometimes to keep the boat on the line it needed to stay on for me to pick up those paddlers.
Watching a really good team do changes is just incredible. The athleticism that you experience it's a really neat thing to see.
The crew that makes the least amount of errors, I mean, you're going to have some errors, but the ones that makes the least amount of errors are tend to be a hit.